comfortable from the standpoint of whether it's your feet, your seat, or your hands, or anything in between. And it's quite the opposite. Riding bikes, granted, there is suffering involved depending on how much you want to put upon yourself, but it doesn't need to be because of your anatomy or parts of your body that are just going numb or tingling, and some of the things that we're all accustomed to. So something that we do at Conte's is Retul bike fit, and there's several different fits that we do. The most popular and the one that's most beneficial is our performance fit, and what that entails is a full physical evaluation, the established range of motion of a rider. We discuss any unique injuries, anything unique about their flexibility needs, and then we're able to basically import that into the software. We get them onto this Move bike, which is highly adjustable from every which way, and we can then use motion capture, which we'll demonstrate shortly. If this is hopefully it will make more sense when we demonstrate it. But through the use of motion capture, we can make sure that all the different angles, the key angles being knee over pedal spindle, back angles, knee extension. Louder. Okay. It helps us ensure that the angles are where we want them to be. And then part of all that is going to be establishing the proper seat selection based on flexibility, based on the width of somebody's the pelvis, the ischial tuberosity bones, and then making sure trying to get them to be as two-dimensional as possible, like the bike is. So I suppose it might be best to kind of demonstrate what goes on during a fit. I think that'll help make more sense of what I'm saying. This is Camden Neville. I'm Fran Lenahan, and we're going to demonstrate the Retul fit as best we can over camera. Okay. Sit up here.
You might be able to move the camera closer.
Can you still see us?
Yeah, that's good. Mm-hmm.
So we begin the process with, we evaluate the rider's feet, we remove the shoes and socks, of course. And in this evaluation, we, from a couple different angles, we look to see what kind of arch support might be necessary. If somebody has unique things going on with their shapes of their feet, how they carry their weight in and out. All of these things influence where the cleats should be located, as well as forward and backwards, but also side to side. We also will add different arch supports. We keep a full line of the different inserts that can go into the shoes in an effort to keep people's feet basically square to the pedal. From here, we go to a range of motion assessment. And essentially, we utilize a massage table. And what we do is just establish how flexible somebody's hips are, as well as hamstrings. And we talk about how that might impact somebody's positioning on a bike. After we do that, we then go to this device over here, which you probably can't see.
I'm getting some questions here.
Okay.
Somebody's asking if you could turn your mic down, because they're getting two transmissions. The question is from Marina, is the performance fit only for uprights, or can you also do recumbent bikes?
I think some of the principles, or all the principles, would apply to recumbent, and I think that that was something we could do. Yes. Mm-hmm. And to give us a call and we can discuss it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it for the moment.
Essentially, fitting is good is for anybody who, if your hands go numb, if your feet go numb, if you get saddle sores, if you get numbness in your sensitive areas that touch the saddle, then the fitting is for you. And then there are reasons why all these things happen, and almost always they can be remedied with either changing the person's positioning on the bike and maybe even installing handlebar saddles, things like that. The other really beneficial way where this comes into play is selecting a new bike. We do a fitting that's called a frame finder fit, and we do everything we just discussed from the physical assessment standpoint, but then we put them on this bike and we emulate any geometry, any bike that could possibly exist in the world. We get them set up, and so it not only helps us be very sure what size bike it should be, but then at the end of it, we're able to digitally map this bike with the digital device that creates all the key measurements and creates a record. So then when we order the bike and it comes in, it can be set up to the millimeter of where we left off on the fit bike, ensuring that, as I mentioned, it's the right size, it's custom fit to the rider, and it eliminates, traditionally bikes are purchased, somebody walks into the shop, and Camden or myself, we pull a bike down, like, oh, you're 5'8", yeah, this bike, it's a medium, yeah, and you go for a test ride. Well, it doesn't account for saddle selection, it doesn't account for any of the setup, and then people make buying decisions off of that. And so the whole idea with the Retul and the fit process is to we don't feel like that's a great experience for a customer. The best experience is to come in, we spend a couple hours together talking about any physical, unique things physically someone has going on, any requirements, flexibility, and then through that conversation, through the measurements that we're able to take on this bike, we can then recommend bikes. You have to figure, if you look at an array of bikes, there's going to be different seat tube angles, there's going to be different head tube angles, and we have the discussion of why certain bikes we would want to preclude from the conversation, just based on them. If they have really short femurs, a slew of different things. So it's just a very informed way to purchase a new bike, and that's something that we do every day, and it works very well. So, any questions? Is anybody out there?
Yeah,
There's about 40 people up.
Okay, cool.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So the use of the retool versus just using your own bike to do the fitting,
Yes.
is that related to, like, if you're buying a new bike, you would use the retool, and if you're,
Correct.
okay,
Exactly.
okay.
This is essentially, it lets us have like a blank slate.
Right.
It lets us have, it's without having to come off. So it'd be the equivalent of having every bike as an actual bike and having to get on the bike, get off the bike, make changes, seat height, fore, aft, different saddles, without having to even come off. We stay on the bike and we're able to spin these dials to raise it up, move it forward and backwards, and immediately change stem lengths, stem angles, change crank lengths, everything possible. And it's hooked up to a power meter, so it's just at our disposal. We can quickly make changes. So stack and reach are your two key measurements when looking at bikes. And in real time, when someone's on a bike, we can set up a 54 road machine, and then real quickly it's a 52 all of a sudden, and it's a very just efficient way of giving the rider the experience of the different frames. And then the next step would be for us to actually set up the bikes according to what we found here. And it's pretty cool how that works. I'm not sure how well this conveys on camera, but we have, with our motion, between our motion capture camera and this little Zen pen here,
Pull it a little closer to you. There you go.
we're able to touch different spots on the bike, and it will create measurements. Measurements that are universal. They can be applied to any bike. So we then get a bike in that we think makes sense through conversations in the fit, and then we can set that bike up. We get them within every time millimeters, like the seat height, stack and reach, any key measurement. So then when they come to test drive the bike at this point. We're still only in the conversation point. When you compare that, riding the bike, all set up, checking the bike out that way versus the traditional way, which is pulling it off the shelf, see how it goes. It's when you look at it that way, the chances of success are pretty low that way versus doing the investment in the time of having a bike fit. Yeah.
We've got 2 questions.
Yes.
A question from Elaine. What is the cost?
Great question. So the frame finder fit, it's $300, and with the purchase of the bike, you get a $100 credit back. So at the end of the day, it's a $200 investment. If you have a bike and you would like a performance fit, it's $300. We also offer an essential fit, which is more, I'd say, based for people who ride bikes where it's maybe a hybrid or they aren't clipping in, and that fitting is $150.
And then we have a comment from Marina, and I apologize if I passed your name. She says, if I'm having hand numbness, this would tell us how to set the handlebars?
That would be something that would be corrected, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. Good question. This is very informal, so I apologize for saying this. I was thinking of putting Cam on the bike, but I almost feel like this is kind of nailing it in this discussion. And I don't know how well it's going to translate on the bike.
Well, you're talking, I think it would be helpful for the big factors.
Okay. Sure. All right. So we just talked about if we did the foot evaluation, we will then do a range of motion physical evaluation, and then we move to a bike. So we'll get on this bike here.
And maybe Andy and I can manipulate the camera a little bit to focus in without ripping any cables in.
Yes, good idea.
Here, he's here, so we can do this.
That's about right.
That looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
So this is Nancy. For those of you who haven't been in Conte's, Fran just got up and started the software on that screen you see in the background. And it has a lot of different measurements that I can't possibly read off, but it looks great.
Do you think we should hook them up or something? That might make sense. Okay.
Put on the show.
Yeah, good.
Just don't electrocute him.
Yeah. He's already been electrocuted once today. So we begin by hooking on a sensor wire bundle, and which I'll do as quickly as I can.
Okay, here, screen a little bit. There you go.
You have staging screens. Thank you.
Oh, we don't want it.
Yes, I understand. That's good. That's good.
Because if we get any closer, we're gonna be cutting off bits.
Yeah, I think that shows. So describe what you're doing.
So what we're doing is we're hooking on sensors, and they go just on key areas that typically are a place in the body that stays pretty still and allows us to have markers. And it'll make sense here on the screen here in a moment.
How many sensors do you typically put on a person?
There is 12 sensors.
12 sensors.
I can't even drop that.
We have a question here. Is the WAB member discount applicable?
No.
Marianne, did you hear no? And then we have a question from Linda. If I ride a road bike and a touring bike, will I need 2 fittings?
No, so that's a great question. So we can fit on one bike, and then we can take a mapping of that bike, and then apply that to a second road bike or touring bike. So it can be all done in one session.
And Linda also asks, is the setup for speed the same as for endurance?
Come again?
That's her question. Is the setup for speed the same as for endurance?
Well, I would say, so the answer to that is going to be, if somebody's comfortable, then they're going to be faster and have better endurance. It's really one and the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Depending on a rider's flexibility, can limit how aggressive of a position that they can hold and be comfortable in. Yeah. Drop the foot down. Drop it.
So what did you just attach to his foot?
Right now, we're just synchronizing the sensors to the camera. So now just slowly raise your foot. So everything is paired up. Now the rider starts to ride, so it'll come out. And we do what's called start, we do a capture. So on the screen here in a moment, I don't know if you're able to see it, but there's a little picture of Camden here. Or just about here.
So for those watching, the screen is showing a biomechanical man moving, and there are red dots for joint locations on his body.
Extroverts do better on TV because they talk out loud about everything that
Sure.
they're doing.
So Brad, how long does a typical evaluation take if someone comes into your store?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours?
Yes, yes.
Are they sitting on the bike the whole time for those
No.
2.5
No,
hours?
the bike they're probably on for about a half hour.
All right, for those at home, the numbers are changing on the screen. And the mechanical display of the person who's moving. Is he going too fast or too slow? Are you?
So then after he's set up, we then are able to massage his positions on the bike.
How do you do that? By those adjustments
Yeah,
you're
so
touching?
these are these little guys here.
Now, are you aiming to get specific angles in certain places? Is that your aim?
Yes, so is this a good space to talk?
Yeah.
So perfect. Yeah, so ideally, we're looking at the knee flexion in terms of how high the knee is, how tight this ankle is having to be, extension, back angle, and then we're also looking at knee over pedal spindle. So while he's on the bike, we can easily slide him back, slide him forward, and in real time, it's giving us, it's constantly measuring him. And then we take one capture and then for the next capture, it'll tell us how many millimeters change has occurred. So it's just a very data intense, very, very specific way of doing bike fit. You know, you can see a lot by eye, I can see a lot by just looking at somebody on a bike, but when I can also have what I think I'm seeing backed up by data, I mean, that's just, it's good for everybody. I think it presents well to a rider, and also it's reassuring to everybody that what a fitter thinks he's seeing is actually happening. So once we get all this massaged and set up, then we just have conversations about comfort. You know, is everything feeling well, feeling good? And then we essentially at that point we start to kind of come to a close. Yeah. Let's see.
We have a question from Elaine. Is the fitting, two questions. Let's see. Should only one fitting be necessary for many years?
That's a great question. So, a couple years potentially, but you have to figure each year we change. Our flexibility will change, depending on how many miles you do. You look at Fran Wenberg, who throws down 10,000 miles a year. You know, each year she could stand to have things looked at on her bike fit and her positioning. And it also depends too, just on, you know, if you have injuries, if things come up, yeah. So it could be that a one fit lasts multiple years, but the reality of it is we change over time.
And then Ken asks, is there any, so this is very objective data, is there input for subjective input from the rider?
Yes, yes. So throughout the whole process, we will ask, you know, is your soft tissue comfortable right now, or you know, how do your hands feel, or it's a combination of the two, but one doesn't work without the other. I mean, we have to find out from the rider how they're feeling.
We're getting several more questions coming in. Is this fitting information transferable to other stores?
In what way?
Well, maybe Elaine, you could type in, what do you mean by transferable to other?
If I can guess, so you can have a fitting done here, and with those numbers, it can be applied to any bike. So if you're traveling, if you're gonna move to Maryland and then one day buy a bike, if you can hand them these numbers and they could use them to set up the next bike.
I got it. I think I got a PDF file.
Yes.
Of all the documented
Correct.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, David asks, if doing a fit to an existing bike, do you transfer the adjustments to that bike as part of the $300 cost?
Oh yes, yeah. Part of that will be making changes to their bike.
And then Marina asks, Has having this instrument helped you verify what you previously were able to discern by eye? In other words, have your eyeball skills gone to a higher level since you got your new equipment?
Yes, yes. So without a doubt, and what's really revolutionized or changed our program is we have a gentleman that works for the company, Chris Duffy, who he's a master fitter. He's one of only, I think, 12 fitters in the nation specialized. I've even recently brought him to California to help teach their fitters within the last several months. So he's not your average fitter, and he is pretty incredible in terms of his knowledge base. So he's been in charge of helping disseminate and train and get other fitters going at each location. So, I mean, what I knew, I had been fitting bikes for many years before working with Chris, but I knew nothing really, you know, as it turns out. I mean, Chris has really helped out quite a bit. But to that point too, you know, if you're fitting somebody who's 5'8", our eyes are very used to seeing if that looks right. But when you fit somebody who's 4'8" or someone who's 6'7", you're not really used to seeing it. So that's when it's really nice to have the objective information to go along with what you think you're seeing.
What are the common adjustments you've noticed? I mean, what's really common that people benefit from in this?
So what I'd say some of the most common challenges people have, well, the number one would be saddle. And oftentimes people will keep buying, I'll talk to people and I bought a saddle, it didn't work, I bought another saddle and it didn't work. And really, it's unless you take the time to measure your sit bones and get an idea about your flexibility and how that impacts saddle selection, it's almost a stroke of luck if you get the right saddle. So that is a big thing. And then positioning, saddles are almost always too close to the handlebars. People think if they have numb hands, they should keep pushing the saddle forward. And that really only makes the problem worse because you're getting it in front of your bottom bracket and basically falling onto your handlebars. So you're not being supported by the saddle anymore. So those are pretty common. Cleat placement is oftentimes, it's a bit willy-nilly, you know, in terms of where they end up being located on people's shoes. So there's best practices are a good starting place, and there's a reason, there's a way to find out where that is, and measuring it and lining it up between the metatarsal joints, first and fifth. Yeah.
So in WAB, we have slower riders, such as myself, and then we have all these really fast guys.
Yeah.
Is there some characteristics that you see more broadly in the faster group?
You're doing it for one to go to the thing. You can sit tight. You've probably gone at 4 miles. Yeah.
Versus, you know, me, I'm a casual, go to the grocery store kind of person.
Yeah. So fitting is for really any rider. It could be for somebody who's trying to ride and hang on to an A ride. I've done fits for folks that ride on comfort hybrids. You know, very upright bikes that they're just not comfortable, and we'll do fittings for them as well. So fitting is for anyone that is on a bike and is not comfortable or not convinced that they're have the setup 100% right. And it really is a matter of, it's really hard to look at ourselves and make changes to ourselves. Sometimes it helps to have a second pair of eyes put on you.
Fran, this isn't a question from this question I had.
Yeah.
Since you've got the power meter connected into the system, can you tell like a different position where you can actually create more power with, say, similar amount of effort?
Yes. Today I was fitting a gentleman, and I always start the fit off at 80 watts is where someone's pedaling. And I told him I was going to bump up the wattage to, I think it was maybe 150 watts.
Right.
Well, he's pedaling, and he goes, well, he thought I didn't turn it back to 150. He thought he was still at 80. And I said, no, you're actually pedaling. He was pedaling at about 190 watts and didn't even realize it. And I attribute that to, he was just over the pedals more, and he was not even aware that he was throwing out way more wattage than he thought he was.
Pushing the seat forward,
Just make, yeah, I don't recall the exact adjustments we did, but whatever
some adjustment.
we were making adjustments, and then, so, yeah, he was not even aware that he was
Right.
putting out the wattage that he
Right.
thought he was because of some of the changes, yeah. Mhm. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was one of the, Chris did a fitting for me,
Mhm.
and he moved my seat forward, and I think it did help me generate a little bit more power than I was generating in my seat movement back.
Yeah.
But I'm sure for everybody it's going to be different based on.
Mhm.
Let's see. I don't see any more questions from the audience.
So I'll conclude, or one thing I could add.
Yeah.
So during the fit, anytime we make changes to a bike, if it's handlebars, saddles, shoes, there's always essentially a comfort guarantee. So, if 30 days down the road, the saddle's just not working, we'll take it back. We'll either refund or credit. Shoes all have it. We realize that if we can get it 95% dialed in on the first visit, that's pretty reasonable. And then we always offer follow-up visits, and sometimes, Fran, we have multiple follow-ups. We have multiple follow-ups, but where we just have to really, take some extra time, invest some time in figuring some things out. And so that's totally part of it as well.
Is the Retul system something that's pretty common amongst bike shops around the country, or is this
I think bike shops there's various types. Retul's not the only one.
Yeah.
In terms of in the Richmond, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Conte's is the only one
It is.
that does fit to this level. There are some other outfits that do fittings in other manners.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess another good clarification is to make, there are different things that some shops or manufacturers have. Where you might stand in front of a pedestal or like a carousel, and it tells you you're at a 54 or you're at a 51. So that's bike sizing. I can look at any of us here and give you a bike size. Fitting is a little different than that. That's the changes of the positioning on the bike, the saddles, the stems, and everything else. There's two different things. Yes. Yeah.
Would you care to comment on some bicycle trends that you see coming down the pike?
Sure. Well, I think a couple more and more tire clearance on different models of bikes to accommodate wider tires is a big one. Disc brakes on road bikes is certainly becoming more and more commonplace, and those are two big ones. Yeah.
And how's it been for you as a shop owner in coronavirus times?
Yes.
Hard?
It's been
Challenging stuff?
It's busy. Yeah,
Busy?
It's been very busy. Unprecedented busy.
Is it like the average person, or are you just seeing more?
We do a lot of entry-level bikes, $500 to $800 bikes. But every segment of our business has grown this year dramatically. Every year we enjoy you predict certain growth, and we've had growth every year, but this year it's been dramatic for sure.
Very good.
What percentage of bikes are e-bikes that you're selling?
More and more. I think we're probably selling 4 or 5 a month now, which is more than certainly last year. Yeah.
Here's a question. Oh, 2 questions from David. How long between setting up appointment and having the fit set up? What's the lead time?
Yeah, so it varies. So it kind of ebbs and flows. We're controlling how many fits we do in a day. If we're working with a rider and they're, letting out a lot of breath, and we don't want to stack up a rider right away, and we try to space them out a little bit for safety right now in our current health environment. So we're limited by that, and then also just since it is, so I guess the long and short of it is right now we're probably about a week out, week and a half out booking. But that can sometimes balloon out, and it sometimes can contract a bit too.
And Raul asked, would a fitting on a regular bike or hybrid translate to an e-bike? Shh, don't tell his wife, but he may get one for Christmas. So does that translate to an e-bike?
If he's had a fitting on a road bike
Mhm.
and he's gonna get a road.
Well, I think
Well, the
she,
fitting on a road bike translates to an e-bike.
For Barb?
Yes.
So we've not done a performance fit for Barb. We did an essential fit. Tell Raul to call me. I can help him out.
okay, anybody doing this, call Fran at the shop.
Yes.
All right.
That's it.
Any more questions from the audience?
Thank
Going
you.
once,
Thank you.
going twice? All right.
Brian, do you have anything else to add?
No, thanks for the opportunity to speak to everybody. I
Yeah.
wish I was more captivating and
No,
Better looking.
it was
That's,
awesome.
Yes.
it was awesome, really. I learned some stuff.
thank you. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Cam.
Thank you all. We're gonna sign off now. Bye.
You're getting a lot of nice comments about you did great.